Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, as-salatu was-salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome everybody from around the world. My name is Bilal Abdul Kareem, and this is the BAK show. Now, as you can probably guess, we are not in the studio. I'm sitting in the car. We are around, it's probably about 3:40 in the morning, and we've got all the kids and everybody inside. I'm traveling. I'm in the Homs area, so I basically had to carve out a little niche so that we can have our discussion here for tonight. And I'm doing it from the car. I hope that you guys are okay with it. Let me know if you all are, and inshallah we'll just carry on as normal. Um, this is one of the blessed 10 nights of Ramadan. And who knows, maybe tonight is Laylatul Qadr. So do your best to do whatever ibadah you could possibly do. And we ask Allah to forgive us all of our sins. Ameen, ameen. All right, everybody. We need to discuss some things here today. Um, okay, well, we've got Khalil Hariri who's here, and he's saying, Assalamu alaikum, akhi. And we like to say to him, Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He says, Hayakallah ya ghali. Allah yahfadhuk. May Allah bless you and make this the best last nights of Ramadan. Brothers and sisters, we've got a lot of problems that are cropping up in Turkey and Gaza, and in a lot of areas, and we're going to need to discuss them because, look, brothers and sisters, we're not going to try to pretend that everything is always going to go according to plan. Well, if it did, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in as Muslims around the world. Um, in Turkey, you've got the jailing of the mayor of Istanbul on accusations of corruption that has triggered protests in Turkey, anti-Erdogan protests. So that's going on there, but that's not one of the main stories, I would say, because I would say that, see, the opposition that supports the mayor and who is against the government, they were doing some very un-Islamic things. And there were reports of them urinating on masjids and doing other wild things. Now, this is not acceptable. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be like that. That's just not the way Turkish society should be seeing itself. Now, as you hear this in the background, here in Syria, like in a lot of Muslim countries, at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to wake people up for suhoor, they go through the areas and they're banging the drums and stuff like that. I don't like it because it wakes the kids up and it makes things more difficult for me and the wife. But, they didn't ask me, did they? And I think that the adhan is sufficient. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. These un-Islamic activities by the opposition is just not acceptable, and it's not going to gain a lot of traction there in Turkey. If you disagree, I can dig it. There's not everything that any leader is going to do that's going to make you happy, but to desecrate the symbols of Islam, brother, you are treading on thin ice in that regard. In Gaza, in Beit Lahia, there were protests that were taking place there today, wherein, or I guess we should say yesterday, where basically they were anti-Hamas protests. Now, I think we should kind of put this in the proper perspective, because this is a story that will very quickly be exploited, and it is as follows. First of all, you had hundreds of people who were protesting in the Gaza area against Hamas. And we have to understand a couple of things here. And just give me a second. I've got my uh, lemon and honey. Okay. Just to continue to remind you, if you've got a question, a comment, or a concern, you can send it right here, and we'll do our best to try to get to read it here and answer your question if we can do it. Now, there were protests of hundreds of people in Gaza protesting against Hamas. Some of them, they had some things that they were saying that Hamas should go, and nobody's going to discount that. But we also have to look at something else. Number one, hundreds of people were protesting after a year and a half of bombing and killings and a genocide being taken place. Well, if you've only got a couple hundred people protesting against you, I gonna tell you that ain't bad. That is pretty good. I'm not discounting what they're saying, but I am saying is that you're going up against Israel, who are masters of manipulation, and they haven't been able to do anything with the Palestinian people up until now, where you've got hundreds of people, just hundreds of people. There are 2 million people in Gaza, and you've only got hundreds of people. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm going to call that less than 0.001%. And like I said, I'm not a mathematician. You guys could probably know better than that, know better than me. So, yeah, I do think that all of their concerns should be looked at and addressed by Hamas as best they possibly can. But it's not realistic that you're going to fight such a one-sided war and a resistance war against such a powerful enemy like the Israelis and being backed by the United States, except that you're going to have some opposition. It's not going to be smooth sailing, particularly when it comes to public opinion. So we have to understand that they said that they would want that they want an end to the war and the bloodshed. I think we all do. And I'm not in Gaza, but I want to see an end to the war and the bloodshed. What about the people that are there? It's just such a very, very disappointing thing to see, because all of the leaders have, or I should say, the leaders of the Muslim countries have failed them. And one of the things that they did talk a lot about or chant about was Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Egypt to take a decisive stance to help them. Well, good luck with that, because his salary, if you want to call it that, depends upon his not understanding of what they're calling for. So I think that it's good that they mentioned it, but I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that, because he's not going to be able to go against America and its 1.5, $1.6 billion investment buy off aid package, whatever you want to call it, that the Egyptians get every year. Now, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi wouldn't be able to maintain his position if he did not have the backing of the United States of America and the tacit approval of Israel. That's real. That's right on their borders, and Allah knows best. Okay, so the situation in Gaza is ongoing, and the bombing continues, the killing continues. Even the Palestinian director who just won all of these awards, who was kidnapped and beaten with the tacit approval of the IDF. But that's not a big deal to a lot of Western news media organizations. You know, Belal was somebody who was not a fighter, was not a combatant, but he was a director. And you see what happened to him. See, brothers and sisters, you have to understand something. Some people may not like what Hamas did on October the 7th of 2023, but you gotta keep it real. The enemy that they are facing, the brutality that they have displayed after October the 7th, It's the same brutality that they displayed before October the 7th, but the news media around the world just were not paying attention. We as Muslims, we understood that and we knew that. So if you are against the activities that they took on October the 7th, and I will be honest with you, I am not against them. And I'll tell you why. But if you are against that, you've got to put it in the proper context, in the respect that the enemy that they are facing. Now, why am I not against it? Bilal, they kidnapped women and children. Bilal, they attacked a concert. Bilal, they did rape. Okay, first of all, the rape allegation was never proven, never ever proven, and the United Nations a special group actually interviewed so many different people, and there was not one confirmed rape case, period. Not one. Now, a lot of so that's one issue. The other issue is that they attacked a concert with innocent people. Those people were occupiers. Those weren't innocent people. Who told you that? First of all, everybody over the age of 18 has mandatory military service for the most part. So those people who were at the concerts, they were all could be considered combatants, all of them, because they're either current or reservists in the military. The other thing is they decided to throw a concert right next to an open air prison. Why would they do that? They would do that because they were asking for trouble. They were taunting those people, and they they got their butts kicked for it. Okay, that's the second thing. So I don't consider them to be innocent people because they weren't. They were combatants of combatant age and were either in the military or reservists. And they decided to throw a concert right next to an open air prison. The third thing is that when it comes to women and children, the first issue is who told you to bring your wife and your kids when you're occupying other people's land, building homes on their land. And when those people decide to strike back and tell you that we ain't having it, then all of a sudden now you want to talk about, oh my God, the women and kids. Who told you to bring them? It's a military zone. And if you choose to bring your wife and your children there, I'm still saying that you cannot target them. But if they are affected by attacks, who could say that that would be unlawful? If I decide that I'm going to steal somebody else's property, and when I go along for the heist, I bring my wife and I bring my kids along with me, and then when they're shooting at me as I'm running to the car with the loot in my hand, and one of the kids gets hit by a stray bullet or something like that, and all, and then I say, "Ah, look what they've done." I said, "Wait a minute. The first thing is that the kids were not targeted. The second thing is, what are you doing bringing them to a heist?" And that's exactly what happened. So, brothers and sisters, uh, I'm not going to unduly try to defend anybody, but I have to be honest with you. You know, um, when you're going to steal other people's property and then you bring along your wife and your children, um, I got to tell you, the burden of that has got to be on the people who were doing stealing and not the people who were resisting. So I have a real major problem with people who were comfortable throwing Hamas under the bus because of what happened on October the 7th, and um, basically so that they could put forward their talking points, they had to agree, yes, Hamas is bad. Yes, Hamas committed war crimes. But what about the Palestinian people? I felt that that was absolutely the wrong thing to do because I don't see that they committed any war crimes. Now, when they took hostages and all, when they actually took hostages, they're taking hostages of people who are occupiers, aren't they? I mean, if I got this wrong, you can let me know. You can, once again, I want to remind everybody that you can give us your questions, your comments. Please put them in the box. We will read them here. But I got to tell you, I see them very much as occupiers, and occupiers are a form of combatants. And that's the reality of the situation. Okay, before we continue, I want to ask you guys for a favor. Look, guys, take a look at this right here. It's called Medina.com slash voices of truth. We need your help. These last 10 nights of Ramadan, brothers and sisters, stay with me for a second. We are documenting the atrocities which took place on the Syrian people under the rule of Bashar al-Assad. Why are we doing that? People are going to say everybody already knows what took place there, Bilal. Okay, just like which took place in Libya. At that time, people were very crystal clear in terms of the atrocities that Muammar Gaddafi and his government were carrying out. Everybody knew that, understood that. They got why the revolutionary forces decided to take them on, Abdul Hakim Belhaj and other than them. As a few years pass, people start to forget. And then they start to paint a picture that Gaddafi was a great person and he was such a nice guy. He was like this big uncle and teddy bear, which he wasn't. Said Naya had a Libyan counterpart called Abu Salim, where thousands of prisoners were executed in a very short period of time. That's a long story in and of itself, but it was no less of a torture chamber than Said Naya. That's the reality of the situation. But there's nobody there that is on the ground and documenting these stories. We are on the ground, and I am heading a group of people who are documenting these stories and atrocities, and we're making them available to the people. But we need your help. Could you please, in these last 10 nights of Ramadan, make a contribution towards what we're trying to do? This is our crowdfunding page, Medina.com slash voices of truth. Take a look at it, and inshallah ta'ala, you'll be able to help us. That's Medina.com, voices of truth. Take a look. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the questions that you might have. Um, we've got here Jugal Awang, who says Israel is massacring Gazans like chickens. Well, when you've got fish in a barrel, they can't go anywhere, they can't do anything. And all you have to do is just continue to shoot at them until nothing else is moving. That's what you have. And I hope everybody is paying attention, knowing that the Americans, the Europeans, these are not honest brokers at all. Because even the deal that was brokered between Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, we're the guarantors. The Israelis unilaterally pulled out of the deal. And so my question is, where are the guarantors? Who is supposed to be making sure that the parties followed through? Now, Hamas promised to return the hostages that were supposed to be in phase one. They did that. But phase two, more hostages were supposed to be released, but that didn't happen. Why? Because Netanyahu and his government pulled out of the deal. That's just the reality of the situation. So, um, phase two never began. The Americans then started to say, release all the hostages now. Well, why would they do that? That doesn't make an ounce of sense. That's like the stupidest thing you could imagine, to release all the hostages now. What about the thousands of hostages that were arrested since October 7th in the West Bank and in other places? Thousands. We're not even talking about the women and children and those that are detained due to administrative detention, which is just another word for indefinite detention. um, Nobody is even talking about that these are people who are hostages as well, and how they are picked up. Nobody is really discussing that, especially not in Washington, Downing Street, and other uh, uh, circles of power. So that's the reality of the situation, and Allah knows best. We've got Primetime Plumbing who says here, um, the only help will come from Sham. Well, I'm so happy that you have such confidence in Shem. So, uh, and so do I. I hope that this is that time for that confidence. It's not that I think that the help won't come from Shem. It's just that we hope that it's in our time, inshallah. Okay. Um, Next, we've got Khalil Al Hariri who says, Brother Bilal, have you seen what happened in Dara? And what do you think is the solution with Israel? We have to fight them. I'm sorry, guys. Um, I know that it's not a good time. It's really not a good time. But also at the same time, we have to show them something. In addition to that, they've been bombing the Turkish. I'm sorry, the Israelis have been bombing the military airports of the new Syrian government. Now, why are they doing that, and what is the significance of that? The Turks want to use those airports to bolster the defenses of Syria, which is a close ally to the Turkish government. And the Israelis don't want the Turks there because the Turks are a power. They are not a bunch of guys running around with Kalashnikovs and hand grenades. And that's not to downplay anything, but I'm just putting it in a perspective that you've got a proper military power and then you've got a rebel force. The two are not one and the same. Netanyahu and Washington want to keep the revolutionary forces as revolutionary forces are, and not to grow into a proper state with a proper military and so on and so forth. That's what they want. But if Turkey starts to encroach in and they're taking over military airports, and you've got anti-aircraft, I'm sorry, uh, missile defense systems, and so on and so forth, that's a direct threat to Israel because Israel knows that eventually they're going to have to fight the Muslims, and they're not going to be able to just keep it limited just to Lebanon and to Gaza. And Allah knows best. Okay, next up, Ahmed says, Salam. Alaikum salam. In a Tucker Carlson interview, Steve Witkoff said he believes Jolani will normalize relations with Israel. Do you see a deal where Israel hands back stolen territory to normalize? No, 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 I don't. The Israelis don't give back territory. And if they do give back any territory, they're going to give it back just to take it back. Oh, they'll do it under some guise of some terrorists showed up with a terrorist dog and a terrorist cat. Um, and that's what I see is the outcome there. Um, uh, I did not see all of that interview. I saw a part of it. But even if he says that Jolani will normalize relations with Israel, it's not completely in Jolani's hands. Um, so I don't think that that would be a good idea. I don't. As the leader of the country, that's his decision to make. But I think that would be deeply unpopular, and I don't think that they would benefit from that at all because the Israelis don't respect any agreement that they make, ever, ever, ever. And you can't sit there and say, well, America's going to act as the guarantor because America is their backer. You only have to look at what happened in Gaza to understand the way that the Israelis operate. They're not going to back. They're not going to be a legitimate broker. Allah knows best, but if they are, it's going to be something we haven't seen yet. Ahmed also says, if so, how would other Islamic factions in Syria react to it? I don't think that you would see their initial reaction um, like protests or anything like that, because that's not really what they actually do. I don't think that there's any Islamic fighter here in Syria, except, I'm choosing my words carefully here. I don't think that there's any Islamic fighter here in Syria, except that they understand that in that probably sooner rather than later, whenever that might be, they're going to have to fight the Israelis. Because the Israelis are 25 kilometers from the capital of Damascus, and they are doing almost daily incursions into Syrian territory. Do you think they don't know about that? They do. So I think that everybody understands that this is nothing more than a preparation phase. But at some point, they're going to have to fight them. They realize that. Next, we've got Naeem Kazan. Western media is pushing killing of Christians. I'm assuming that you're talking about in Gaza and the West Bank. I don't think that they're pushing that. I just think that the Western media is firmly entrenched in the camp and the hip pockets of the state of Israel. So they have to turn a blind eye towards what's going on to their Christian brothers and sisters. And I think that that's one of the it's a shame. It's a shame. Now we've got Joad here who says Libya was better off with Gaddafi. Look at it now. US, Russia, Turkey, UAE, Egypt, and Saudi are all in Libya. All right, listen, let's talk about this for a brief second here. You say that Libya was better off with Gaddafi. Well, that's easy for a non-Libyan not living in Libya would say. And I understand what you're saying. Yes, it has turned into fauda. But look, let's put something on the table right here, right now. Any country that's not going to implement Sharia, it's going to be fauda. I'm going to say this again. Any country that's not going to implement Sharia, there's going to be fauda. It's not going to be a good outcome. And what happens is that the reason why the state of Israel and other than them are so keen to keep Islamic fighters, uh, Islamically oriented political figures, and the like of them weak, attacked, and under fire is because they understand that the only system that will offer resistance to their global agenda is the Islamic system. Now, what they want is that if you're going to oppose them, but you're going to oppose them in the name of democracy, or you're going to oppose them in the name um, of national identity, our national politics, and such like that. That, because even if you are successful, then you have successfully removed yourself from the rest of the connection to the Ummah, turned it into a Syrian thing or an Egyptian thing. And even then, they wouldn't be happy with a victory. But if you got a hard fought victory and it cost you a lot and you got the victory, and then you want to turn it into some type of what's anything, I think that plays right into their hands. Alhamdulillah, here in Syria, it hasn't really been quite like that. The Ummah supported this revolution, and alhamdulillah, I'm not seeing so much Syria first, Syria for Syrians, and stuff like that. And that's a good thing because we're not going to be able to take on such powerful enemies just with Syrians alone. That's the reality of the situation. That's what they want. They want you to say, they want to be able to pool resources from Russia, Iran, US, Israel, and so on and so forth. But they want to make it like, okay, guys, you guys can only fight us with just the local people. But we've got people from around the world, armaments from around the world. But you guys can only fight us, just you guys. Got it? Or we're going to call you terrorists. And unfortunately, so many of the leaders and commanders have fallen into that trap. And what do they end up doing? They end up doing basically saying, okay, we don't want to accept muhajirin. We don't want to give them prominent roles. Why? Because they'll call us terrorists. They're going to call you terrorists anyway. It's not going to make a difference. But it matters less that you are or are not a terrorist to them, and it matters more that you're able to pull resources, vast resources from around the world, and that's what scares them. Okay. All right, we've got here Abdul Rafe, and he says, a lot of Muslims around the world still believe that Bashar government was a threat to Israel, and that's why he was thrown out. It is important to educate people about human rights violations. Before we talk about the geopolitical aspect of it, let's talk about what life was like for an average Syrian. Syrians were not allowed to do anything. You couldn't even open up a Mahad of Quran, a Quran Institute, or a religious studies, except that it would have to be called the Esed Quran Institute. The Esed this, the Esed that, and everything had to be Esed. First thing. And if you did, then the Mukhabarat would come to get you. And I started with that because that's just the very smallest basic thing to teach people Quran. And if you're giving a class in a masjid and you are not on the list of people who have basically bowed down to Awqaf, then you could very well be arrested. And what happens when people get arrested? They disappear. There are thousands of people who their loved ones were in Saidnaya, they were in Tedmore, they were in Philistine branch prison, never to be heard from again. I've been running up and down this country looking for different prisoners of people who've contacted me from outside and asked for my help. And I do my best. But, brothers and sisters, the amount of carnage that went on in those prisons, the starving of prisoners, the killing of them. In one place, I did an interview, which will be made apparent to the brothers and sisters or made available for you to watch soon, wherein one of the detainees said that sometimes when a prisoner would die, they would come and take him out right away. But if he would die on a Wednesday, there would be no funeral car to take him or any uh, uh, automobile to take him away from the prison until Saturday. I said if he died on Wednesday, he'd be in the cell until Saturday. He mentioned how it was in June, July, August, the hot months, and sometimes people would die while they're in prison and they would just be left there. I mean, how bad can it get? Starving of the prisoners and so on and so forth. I mean, there was no justice. Forget about that. If you get accused of, and God forbid, of terrorism or crimes against the state, there's no point in putting a defense together. You're not really defending yourself. It's over. You're not going to court and then you're going to disprove the charges. It just doesn't work like that. And because even the judges are not prepared to sit there and to take the heat for freeing a would-be terrorist. It's easier for them to send you to prison for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years for you to never be heard from again. So, brothers and sisters, we didn't even get into the geopolitical aspect of it. And I don't need to get into that. When you deal with your population with no justice, starving prisoners, indefinitely detaining them, detaining family members, detaining children, Do we need to talk about what Russia's talking about and what Russia's doing and what Iran is doing? We don't need to talk about that. Come on, guys. Okay, next up, we've got could you assess possibility that Israel is behind recent destabilization of Syria with intent of partitioning it and thus creating space for expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank? I don't think that that their interference has to do a lot with with Palestinians coming into Syria. I think it has a lot more to do with keeping Syria weak. Therefore, they are backing the certain members of the Druze community, certain members from the different communities that would give the new government in Damascus a hard time, keep them busy, don't let them rest, arming them, and so on and so forth. I think that that's more of what it's about. I don't think that driving out the Palestinians from Gaza at this time is a realistic. Um, I don't think that it's real, even though Donald Trump, he continues to say, but Donald Trump says a lot of things. But I don't think that it's realistic. I don't think that they think that it's realistic. But I do think that the Israelis would want to do it at some point. But I just don't think that that is the goal of these destabilization tactics. Because if Syria were to become one Syria, that means with the Kurdish militia forces being absorbed by the government, resolving of hostilities with the Druze community, and so on and so forth. That's a direct existential threat to the state of Israel. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. All righty. Right, we're going to take one more. Okay, Hisham Hassan makes a point here, and he says, why is Syria so quick to resist Lebanon on the boundaries, but hesitates much to resist Israel? Look, I don't think that this really requires a big answer. If you've got two enemies that are taking your property, they're stealing some of your crops, both enemies, and it's you, your brother, and your cousin. You guys are three. On that side, you've got a group of 25 armed and and they're stealing 10 apples from your orchard. On that side, you've got an angry kid with a dog, and he's stealing 10 apples from your orchard. Which one are you going to take on? The reality of the situation is that the revolutionary forces are revolutionary forces group, and they're armed like revolutionary fighters, meaning they don't have the weaponry of a proper state. That's real. I mean, this even Bashar al-Assad did not have in his heyday the armament to take on Israel. He didn't display that he was interested in doing it anyway, but he certainly didn't have the armament to do it. And so how much less so a degraded military that's been taken over by revolutionary forces. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Oh my goodness. Before we go, Mr. Waters, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Bilal. Greetings from Big Mick, UFI, Boulder, Colorado. I can't believe that I got this message from this brother. May Allah bless you and your father. May Allah have mercy on him. I mean, brother, you absolutely positively have to direct message me You can't just leave it like this, guys. For you guys that don't know, this is a very, very good friend of mine that I haven't seen since like 1999, and I'm just like ecstatic that he's in the house. So, man, direct message me so I can get your number, guys. Jazakumullah khair. Last thing that I want to just impress upon everybody is, once again, I want to tell you about our Voices of Truth. Voices of Truth. We are documenting the crimes that the Bashar al-Assad government, the disappearances, the torture, we're documenting it, but we need your help. We need your financial contributions so that we can make this a reality, so that in these short interviews that we're going to be doing with so many different people from all different walks of life, made available to the world so everybody and anybody could see for years to come the oppression that these people lived under. Even I wasn't even fully aware until the rest of the territories opened up, and we've been having these kinds of conversations. Medina.com/voices of truth. This is our crowdfunding page. Please, especially in these last nights of Ramadan, help us out. It would mean the world to us to be able to make this a reality. I am your host, Bilal Abdul Kareem, coming at you from Humps.